Number 1. Every new character gets access to 2 free temporary pets, the Snail and Puffroom. Puffroom comes from the level 33 quest on the left side of your screen in the light bulb, and it is exceptionally good at leveling an alt that you don't have access to a pet from the shared cash shop. It comes equipped with both an auto HP and auto MP potter, which makes it very good at leveling new alts in a very short amount of time, but as it has a very short lifespan, plan accordingly when you want to accept it. Sometimes there's an area you want to go to that just isn't in the guide, or the guide requires something to actually unlock the area. On top of that, you also don't have a hyper teleport rock. When this happens, you can always go to Pantheon and use the interdimensional portal there, which has access to some places that even the guide can't go to. Afterlands is a relatively short but very important questline for almost every character to do in terms of progression. Without it, the average player is going to have empty totem slots, which just means you're losing stats you would otherwise have. So if you're going to do it eventually, you may as well do it as early as possible when you can actually earn some meaningful experience from it. You can also store some of the etc. items from the Afterlands quests inside your storage and use them on your next character you plan on doing the quest on. By doing so, you're going to be able to auto-complete the occasional quest you pick up inside of there. You can just continue it on with every alt you do afterwards. Building your Legion is an essential part of character progression and account progression that most players are going to go through. And if you would like to make this easier on yourself while also building up many useful resources, you can actually get as many characters as you can stand doing to as high enough level to do Zakum, and rotate through as many as you can stand within a day and take down Zakum on each of them. This will passively level them up while also farming Meso and also getting other useful character building materials. If this is a method that actually appeals to you, or just daily boss farming on multiple characters, you can actually preserve the 5-hour snail that we talked about earlier, only bring it out to loot after a boss to prevent yourself from manually looting, and then put it back into your inventory so you can potentially keep this one snail alive for months. I mean, you're talking about seconds and it lasts 5 hours. If you're starting to outgrow Zakum's experience by a little bit, it's time to start incorporating Horntail into this. Normal is what you'll probably be able to handle at first, and once you get high enough level and better gear, which we'll cover later, then you can start to do Chaos Horntail. Around the same time, you can also start to incorporate normal Pink Bean, and if your character is even strong enough, you can include normal Arcarium. All of these bosses will become significantly easier to do on alts as you build your Legion up, which is going to happen by doing this method. While doing this method, you should always be grabbing a rune before defeating these bosses. Now, for the later ones I mentioned, you may actually not be strong enough to defeat them within the time range of a regular rune. For those characters that struggle, there's always the Evan Link skill, although it is limited to 4 free transfers a day. If you're having trouble finding runes on the regular, here's a little trick for you. There are several low-level monster maps where players like to rotate in and out of repeatedly looking for runes of darkness. They force runes to spawn and leave runes that aren't runes of darkness behind for anyone to grab. Granted, this method does diminish in value the more people that know about it, so spread out, pick some unique maps. Now, to get leveling alts to be able to defeat bosses like Chaos Horntail and normal Pink Bean with ease, you're going to want to use the cubes you get from bossing to invest into them. The best and cheapest way to accomplish this is going to be with mystical cubes, a very cheap and available resource for many players. Target items that are cheap to reroll in mass with multiple mystical cubes and get your character up strong enough to actually beat these bosses, which will give you more of these resources as well. Moving on to item related tips. Cubing items that are level 120 and below actually cost significantly less than 130 and higher, and this is going to be a key point of progression to actually getting your alts to be able to defeat bosses on a budget. Items like your secondary weapon and your emblem start at a low level like this, which means they're very cheap to cube and get good potentials on. As for other gear, boss drops such as Zakum face accessories or Horntail's ring, these are all low level items, meaning it's very cheap to get good potentials on them. These are going to be critical for you to actually be able to farm these bosses for experience on these characters, as well as making it easier to level to 200. When you intend on cubing your gear, you might have the desire to go fast as hell. Maybe it's because you intend on using hundreds of cubes, or you're just impatient, but you don't want to make a hasty decision and accidentally roll off something you wanted to keep. Have it both ways by mousing over the area above where you're agreeing to cube, and you can actually see the stats before they visually show up on your screen. One of the first resources that many players are going to find themselves really trying hard to get is potential scrolls. They are very scarce in the beginning of the game, and by the end you'll be drowning in them. But in the beginning, when you're trying to make it work, the best thing you can do is use the transfer hammer as a potential scroll with extra steps. Find the necessary path of gear you need to get from point A to point B, farm the right piece of gear with a potential, even go for 3 lines so you can skip the stamp, and then you're good to go. Monster collection is a thing, and it's kind of masochistic to actually try to complete this thing because getting every elite is a nightmare. It can take ages for your elite to spawn, and sometimes that means literally out-leveling the map and no longer being able to spawn elites without a rune of darkness. This means elite boss curses from leaving a rune on your map for too long is going to be your best friend. Leave it on there, stop earning experience, and take as long as you need. However, if you're just interested in more elites spawning the old-fashioned way, or you're farming them for an event unrelated to monster collection, every time you get an elite to spawn and kill it, change to the next channel. You're banking on the fact that the next channel is going to have more enemies killed in progress towards the next elite than the channel you just put on a fresh timer. However, if you can see that an elite boss is about to spawn, you may want to stay in the map for either the rewards or the bonus elites that spawn alongside it. Now, if monster collection is a goal of yours that you would like to get progress towards this steadily and slowly, then whenever you level a character, you're going to want to deviate from leveling guides and just go to maps that have anything that you can, collect in your collection. But you may also want to stop and go for elites, because eventually you're going to have nothing but high level characters and nothing that can actually spawn something like an elite wild boar. Just remember that elites are not needed, they're just for 100%. If you're sick of playing Legion Tetris, use a Legion solver. You may have heard of one before, but maybe you never looked into it. Well, it's this. The link is down in the description below to find this, and it's incredibly useful for just, solving your Legion and not having to play a puzzle game. And a personal tip for the way I use this thing, because I actually don't like using the Legion solver very much, I like to use it as little as possible. So what I like to do is build a base of my Legion of characters that will never change again. This means any level 250 character that you may have because they're maxed out, or something like a level 210 Phantom, because what lunatic likes to play Phantom these days? In your quest to get 8,000 or more Legion, you may find yourself kind of drowning in familiar cards. There's a lot of them, and if you would like to hoard them, whether it be for alt character badges or just because you're a hoarder, you might want to consider making an alt character with the express purpose of holding these things, and an alt pirate is the perfect character as they do start with an expanded inventory. One problem you may encounter in making 40 plus characters on a single account in a game where everybody's doing the same thing is finding a unique name. It's quite the challenge to say the least, and if you don't want to add a bunch of X's and numbers to your name like MapleStory players of old used to do, there's a couple tricks we used to use way back in the day that may be lesser known now. Most notably that lowercase L's and capital I's look the exact same in MapleStory. Everybody can see when you have an accented O or an E or, an umlaut on a character, any of those things, those are very visible. But this is one that a lot of players won't know unless you try to whisper them, and it tells you that player doesn't exist. Unlike the last tip, one thing that is not forgotten to time is how long MapleStory maintenances last. It's a legend, it's a meme, it's a curse, but what a lot of players might not know or may not consider is that it's also a blessing. The time that the servers are down are actually regenerating the burning zones in a lot of different areas, some of which are usually basically grinded down to zero, so it's a perfect chance to actually get some really meaningful grinding in. While you're grinding, you're also going to want to constantly be using double EXP coupons as well as a lot of other things, and if you wish to save a bunch of 2x coupons for future events or for a future character, there's only one way to do that, and that is Sunday Monster Park boxes. If you open them, the coupons will expire, but the boxes themselves will not expire ever, and they can also be transferred to any character. Bossing. I'm going to start this off with probably one of the most important ones that any player who's playing a class with this effects should absolutely know. If you're familiar with bosses in MapleStory, you know that many of them have percent HP attacks. Many of these do 100% HP damage that cannot be mitigated by normal sources of damage mitigation. However, some classes like Mahil or Paladin, or even all of the Signetites, as well as some others, have access to percent HP damage mitigation. And if you would like to take advantage of these mechanics fully, and you absolutely should, you need to use power elixirs. If you mitigate a very low percent of HP damage, such as 5 or 10%, which is very common, you're going to get hit by an attack that does 100% of your HP normally, which is going to take you down to 10%. A ginger ale will heal you for 75% of your max HP, bring you up to 85%, making the next 100% attack that would hit you kill you instantly. And for the rest of the classes that actually have to adhere to boss mechanics completely, make sure to make your skill effects as transparent as you can tolerate and minimize your chat. That way you can see as much of the boss fight as clearly as possible. Once you understand the boss fight better, this won't be as necessary. Once you start doing boss mules, Chaos Root Abyss and regular Root Abyss are going to be regular things you do. Every time you kill one of these bosses, an NPC has a chance to spawn afterwards. This NPC has a shop selling many useful things like boss elixirs, potential scrolls, pouches full of plants and ore, which can be very useful. On top of that, it's all very affordable, so always make sure you check them out. Boss fights can be tough, and sometimes it's because you don't have the mechanics down very well, but you do have the DPS. In these cases, anytime you die in the boss fight, you should stay dead for as long as possible. Let the timer automatically res you, that way you let any cooldowns that may be on cooldown have as much time to refresh as possible. This method is especially useful for hard Magnus and especially paired with the resistance link skill. In the endgame, when you do series bosses, you're going to have a little bit of a ritual. This is going to involve consuming multiple things and doing multiple things to get various buffs that increase your attack, boss damage, everything that's going to help you kill the boss. But here's the thing, another part of that ritual for now is entering the cash shop to buy buff freezers to actually keep these things on you. And while buff freezers are very soon after making this video being removed from the game game, thank God. Some may still need to enter the cash shop to get pets that they're transferring from one character to another, and it's very important that you buff after you've done everything in the cash shop. We all know that the cash shop is actually the crash shop. You have a pretty high chance of crashing anytime you go into there, and if you do that, you're going to lose all your buffs. So, just keep that in mind. When you start doing Arcane River dailies, you may be a little bit of a goldfish sometimes, and you may forget what dailies you actually did. Well, you can go to the Spiegelman NPC, and he will keep track of what weeklies and what dailies you've already done. One of these activities that many people seem to struggle with is Spirit Savior. First off, you should always expand the map like this so you can see a clear picture of where to go. Once you get to the end when you've collected 4 or 5 spirits, this is where people start to struggle. No matter what, I always try to get my 5th one and aim to be either at the top left or the top right. After that, I wait for the spirit to get as close to me as possible, then I'll either jump down like this and flash jump across, or do whatever your class has for mobility. Then you can easily get to the middle while it's chasing behind you. Alternatively, you can once again let it get close, jump over with the mushroom, flash jump backwards, or do whatever you can to stop your mobility, and just thread the needle down here into the bottom. These are simple ways that pretty much every class has access to. 2 easily accessible endgame activities that everybody should be doing to get Meso is MapleStory and Ursus. These 2 together can earn you over 100 million Meso a day, which is an extremely good amount of income, especially for players who haven't established boss mules yet. Now, if you're somebody with a system that has struggled running Ursus and people actually clear it before you even load in, you can actually do Ursus solo. You may not get as many rewards, but you will still get the Meso, and that's what really matters. If you don't like a messy inventory or just have some things you would like to find easily, I prefer to lock items at the end of my inventory to the far right, because anything new automatically goes to the left. When star forcing and you do not care about star catching, you can just overlap the window here and you can just rapidly enhance to your heart's content and just watch billions of your Meso disappear. When doing your keybinds, rebind the NPC interact key to Y. Any dialogues that have a yes or no, the Y will automatically go to yes. This way you have a 2-in-1 key, and it's just really convenient. When searching with search bars in MapleStory, whether it be in the cash shop or the map looking for monsters, you can use a partial search term to find exactly what you want with typing very few letters. For example, when I go in the cash shop looking for buff freezers, the only thing I type is FF space F. If you want to keep your character selection screen clean and organized, you can send all the characters that you're done with leveling, whether they hit 210 or 250 or whatever your goal for them might have been, you can send them to the back of the list. That way you don't have to look at your 0 anymore. This might be an incredibly personal thing, but I've resisted it for many years, and now that I've done it, I am very thankful I did. Put your character's burst rotation on 1 to 6 or whatever version of that you may want to use. The point is, you can put them in the exact order they need to be cast in, and that way you can unify it across all your characters and not have to worry about remembering like 10 boss mules worth of boss rotations that you put on various different keys. Speaking of keys, the battle analysis is a very useful tool, and by putting it on a hotkey, you can actually open it and turn it on and off with the exact same hotkey, making it very easy to use while you're doing something like trying to test leveling out or actually get an accurate read on your damage. There's also a button on your chat that you can press to make it as a pop-out window that can actually go outside of the MapleStory window and onto another monitor, or you can keep it on your main monitor. That way you can actually see Smegas, if it's not double miracle time like when I decided to film this. Or you can also just switch to one of the other tabs in the chat window that will allow you to see megaphones more easily without getting spammed out by system messages, or just make your own altogether. In any case, that is all I have for today, so I hope you learned at least one thing from this video. If not, thank you for watching anyway. And as always, thank you to my members and my patrons for supporting my content, and I'll see you in the next one.